Join me tonight on Twitch and YouTube at 9 p.m. Eastern, where we will play NFL Trivia for cash prizes. Link to play below. And now, on with our feature presentation. September 29th, 1968. It's week 4 of the AFL season, and we're over at War Memorial Stadium in Buffalo, New York, for this AFL East battle between two in-state rivals in the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets. This is a game that, more than half a century later, would live on in professional football history as one of the biggest regular season upsets of all time, because it's an upset that, when you break down what both of these teams did during the season, should not have been even remotely possible. It would be like if the 2016 Cleveland Browns, who at 1-15, got their only win of the season against the New England Patriots, the team that won the Super Bowl. In one corner, you had a Buffalo team that was 0-3, had fired its original head coach after the second week of the season following a 48-6 loss to the Oakland Raiders, and after leading a team in absolute dysfunction, including a story which we'll touch on in a future video, where after a poor loss in the preseason, their coach had his guys run a padded practice where everyone, including the quarterbacks, could get hit, removing the red jerseys from them, which, shocker, led to their starting quarterback getting hurt. There's a reason the Bills were really, really bad. You had a Buffalo team that, as we would find out later, would finish the season with just one win and would get the number 1 pick in the combined AFL-NFL draft, acquiring the highly touted USC running back O.J. Simpson because of how poor they were. And in the other corner, you had a New York Jets team that was undefeated after playing 2 games, in which they looked like the best offense in the AFL, scoring 67 points, and a Jets team that, as we would later find out, would win the AFL and would win the Super Bowl, stunning the Baltimore Colts to be the best team in professional football, and to win not just their first title ever, but the AFL's first title ever. This was a game that was the ultimate mismatch. This was the best team in football that could not lose a game against the worst team in football that was absolutely reeling and could not buy a win, no matter how hard they tried. And yet, as you're watching, in a stunning upset, despite the fact that the Jets were 19-point favorites and were expected to absolutely blow the doors off of an inept Bills team, it was Buffalo who stunned the football world and came out on top. Because when the final gun went off, the Bills picked up their first and what would be their only win of the season, taking it by a final score of 37-35, in a game that wasn't even that close, seeing as midway through the fourth quarter, the Bills led at 37-21. Buffalo's defense forced Joe Namath, arguably the best quarterback and the most high-profile player in the AFL, to throw 5 interceptions, including not 1, not 2, but 3 pick sixes, as their defense forced 6 turnovers combined. Buffalo's offensive line actually kept their quarterback upright, not allowing a single sack all game, despite the fact that the Jets had one of the most talented defensive lines in all of football, with 3 players, including Verlin Biggs and John Elliott, recording double-digit sacks that season. All things considered, it might be the biggest regular season upset, not just in AFL history, but in pro football history. It's up there with the likes of Buffalo's win in 1984 against Dallas, Washington's strike win in 1987 against Dallas, and Cleveland's win in 1950 against Philadelphia as some of the craziest upsets in regular season pro football. But what you might not realize is just how close Buffalo came to doing it a second time, and how close Buffalo came to actually sweeping the Jets in 1968. Seriously, the Bills almost finished the season with a 2-11-1 record, with both wins coming against the Jets. And the reason that they did it, or at least one of the main reasons that they did it, one of the stupidest and most idiotic coaching decisions you're ever going to see in your life. And I do not say that lightly, because I've seen a lot. one of the most baffling things that a head coach did that literally every single fan in attendance would not have done, and something that, more than half a century later, deserves to be remembered as one of the stupidest coaching moments in not just Buffalo Bills history, but in pro football history. Because if you want one awful decision that sums up just how bad the Bills were in 1968, this is the one right here. This is the one where they truly earned that number one pick. Because this is the story, by what might just be, considering the circumstances, the dumbest coaching moment in Buffalo Bills history. Before I talk about the actual decision in question, because trust me, it's a real head-scratcher, we need some context to understand how this game was going. Because when you break down what was happening during the game, it makes the decision a million times worse. It's November 3rd, 1968. It's week 9 of the AFL season. And now, it's time for the rematch over at Shea Stadium between the Bills and the Jets, after the Bills pulled off the upset of the century just 2 months ago. And yet, somehow, if the Bills pulled this one off, it might have been a bigger upset than the last time. Even though the Jets lost the first game despite being 19-point favorites, to give you an idea of how the seasons were going for both of these teams, the Jets were 20-point favorites in this one, favored by even more than they were the last time. Buffalo, ever since winning that game against New York, had failed to win a single game, as they were 1-6-1, and were hands down the worst team in the league. They have the second worst offense in the AFL, scoring just 107 points through 7 games, or barely over 15 points per game. And they had the worst defense in the league, allowing 218 points, or a whopping 31 points per game. On average, teams were doubling Buffalo's score, and Buffalo's point differential of minus 111 was not just the worst in the AFL, but the second worst team, the Miami Dolphins, were at minus 73, not even in the same stratosphere as Buffalo was. As for the Jets, their season was going in the complete opposite direction. They were one of the best teams in the league, sitting at 5-2 and atop the AFL East by 2 games. Win this one against Buffalo like you should, and you go to 2.5 games atop the division with 6 to play, sitting pretty to make the postseason, since only the division winner made it. However, once again, to the shock of everyone, Buffalo came to play. For whatever reason, the Bills just happened to be the Jets' bogey team. You know how you have those holes in golf that no matter how well you're playing in the round, you just can't get a good score in? You know how sometimes you play FIFA or Madden or any other video game, and there's one team that you just can't beat, no matter how bad they might be, or no matter who their players are? Well, that was what the Bills were to the Jets in 1968. Because even though these two teams should not have even been on the same field, Buffalo, once again, was playing lights out, at least defensively. It seemed like the Jets were going to be able to win this one, seeing as they led it 19-7 after 3 quarters, but the Bills were not going away. Not one bit. Like I said, their defense came to play, as Joe Namath, despite his success that season, went just 10 for 28, completing just 35% of his passes for 164 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception, and a passer rating of 41.4. For some perspective, at the time, Namath's lowest completion percentage in a game that season was 44%, which came against the Bills in the first meeting. And here the Bills were, not just doing it again, but making him 9 whole percentage points worse. And in any game at the time in his career where Namath threw at least 25 passes, this was his second lowest completion percentage ever. Buffalo's run defense held the Jets to just 110 yards on 36 carries, meaning that the team averaged barely 3 yards per carry. Buffalo was not going away quietly, and even though Buffalo's offense was kind of poor, with the team turning it over 5 times and quarterback Hayes Stevenson throwing 3 interceptions, Buffalo was just hanging around. And you know what happens when you let a team hang around in a game that you really should put away. Eventually, that team is going to capitalize. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Because after trailing 19-7, the Bills cut the deficit from a 12-point game to a 5-point game when Stevenson threw a touchdown pass to Paul Costa from 10 yards out. Fun fact, Costa scored 7 touchdowns in his pro football career, all with the Bills. And this was the last one he ever scored. So this is a small piece of history right here. And then came the big one. Then came the one that crushed the hearts of Jets fans, had them wondering if they were living a nightmare, and had them experiencing the strangest case of deja vu. Because when the Bills' defense forced a stop and forced the Jets to punt, the Bills returned that punt all the way to the house for a touchdown. Haggard Clark took the punt 82 yards all the way to silence the crowd at Shea Stadium and to the end zone for the score. Just like that, the Buffalo Bills, the freaking one-wing Buffalo Bills, were beating the mighty New York Jets. With just a few minutes left in the game, the Bills were leading it 20-19. Now comes the all-important extra point. Clark got the team in the end zone. Now, it was time for the Bills to really put the pressure on the Jets, as if they hadn't already. Remember that even though the NFL did not have the 2-point conversion back in 1968, the AFL had it. In the American Football League, much like you can do today, you could absolutely go for 2 points after a touchdown, and you could absolutely score 8 points on a given possession. Which means it's time for the Bills to draw something up, get this 2-point conversion, make it a 3-point game, and make the Jets decide whether or not on their ensuing drive, they should just play for the tie or try and go for the win, since overtime was not a thing back then in the regular season. This was unfamiliar territory for Buffalo. Not just the fact that they were in the lead in the fourth quarter, but that they were in a go-for-2 situation. Under head coach Harvey Johnson, ever since he took over in week 3, they had only attempted 1 2-point conversion, but it was time to do it again. So let's see what the Bills had drawn up to make this a 3-point game and really make the Jets sweat. Roll the tape. Editor? Where's the tape? I thought we went over this. When I say roll the tape, you need to show the play. I know footage of this 2-point conversion exists. NFL Films in 1968, in conjunction with the AFL, did a great job documenting just about every single scoring play. So let's try this again. Don't screw it up this time, editor. You're on thin ice. Roll the tape. Oh, come on, that's twice now. Do I really have to do everything myself? Are you telling me you can't find the footage of this 2-point conversion? Oh, no. Don't even tell me. Don't even tell me. Don't even freaking tell me that they kicked the freaking extra. Of course they did. Are you actually kidding me? They kicked the extra point to go up by 2 late in the fourth quarter instead of going for 2? Well, I'm sure this won't backfire in any way whatsoever. Of course it did. Yep, that's right. The Buffalo Bills and head coach Harvey Johnson, in all of their stupidity, decided that up by 1 point late in the fourth, and with the 2-point conversion available at their disposal, to kick the extra point and go up by 2, changing absolutely nothing about what the Jets needed. If you go for 2 and you get it, boom, you're up by 3 points. A field goal only ties the game instead of giving them the lead. And heck, the Jets might not even try the field goal because there's no overtime. Games ended after 4 quarters regardless of what the score was, so you might be able to walk out if you're with a win. But kicking the extra point to make it a 2-point game, meaning that the Jets can kick a field goal and take the lead with no added stress whatsoever? That's one of the stupidest things I've ever seen a head coach do. And sure enough, the Jets drove down the field, kicked a 35-yard field goal courtesy of the late Jim Turner, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, and took a 22-21 lead late in the game. Buffalo was then forced into some desperation plays that they otherwise would not have tried, which led to a turnover and 3 more points by the Jets, as the Jets won it by a final score of 25-21. The Bills played their hearts out. The Bills gave it everything they had, especially defensively. They almost pulled off another stunning upset. And then, head coach Harvey Johnson ruins it by deciding, hey, you know what would be a good idea in a 1-point game with just minutes remaining in the contest? Let's kick the extra point. Which raises the obvious question, why the heck did the Bills do that? And folks, you're not going to believe this. I promise you, you're not going to believe this. Because the whole city of Buffalo was anticipating hearing the response of their head coach as to this act of stupidity. And fortunately for us, twice a week, Harvey Johnson, the head coach, actually wrote a column in the Buffalo Evening News going over the game. Nice transparency. And he poured his heart out and explained his decision. Said Johnson on why he kicked the extra point, I apologized to the players after the game for not going for the 2 points after Clark's 82-yard punt return touchdown had put us ahead 20-19. There's no way of knowing whether we would have made the 2-pointer. I just got excited and didn't realize the score until we were lining up for the kick. Then, it was too late. You didn't realize the score? You didn't know what the score was? I'm sorry, what? Okay, there was a lot to break down with this comment. First off, how do you not know what the score is? That is the most basic piece of information that everyone knows at any given time. Literally every single fan in the stadium knew the score. So how do you not know it? I know there's a lot of information that goes through your head as a head coach at any given time. And sometimes, things can fall by the wayside. But come on, the freaking score? You didn't know that? You don't even have to memorize or think hard about that information. If your team scores a touchdown, which changes the score, and you don't know what the score is, you could, look up at the freaking scoreboard. Shea Stadium had a scoreboard. It was a dump, but it had a scoreboard. You're telling me you couldn't take one glance up at that thing and realize, okay, we're up by 1? You're telling me, by that logic, you didn't know the score for the entire game and were coaching the whole time without knowing whether you were winning or losing? I wouldn't put it past him. Honestly, I wouldn't put it past him. On one sideline, you had Jets head coach Weeb Ewbank, a Hall of Fame head coach who was absolutely brilliant and was fooling other teams all season. And on the other sideline, you had a man who not only didn't know the score, but not knowing this information, couldn't even take half a second to look up at a scoreboard. That's just incompetence of the highest order. Number 2, when you were lining up for the kick, you finally realized, oh crap, we're up by 1. We really should be going for 2 here. And you didn't call a timeout? You easily could have stopped this from happening and prevented the team from lining up for the extra point. You could have called a timeout. Why didn't you call a timeout? You know how sometimes when you play Madden, if you sort defensive plays by most recent, you might accidentally kick on a field goal block when the other team is on offense? This is like deciding, instead of calling a timeout, to just stick with that and not rectify that mistake, which, shocker, leads to disaster. So not only did you not know the score of the game, but when you finally realized the score of the game, you decided not to do anything about it? How inept of a coach are you? This is like if you're a big lawyer on a case and you don't even know the name of the company that you're representing. And once you realize that you have no idea, instead of writing down the company name on official court documents, you decide to do nothing and change nothing about the documents and just leave them as insert name here. You look incompetent. And that's what Harvey Johnson was here. Outright incompetent. And number 3, I love how Johnson said, there's no way of knowing whether we would have made the 2-pointer. First off, let's flash back to this game 1 month prior on October 12th against the Miami Dolphins, which the Bills tied 14-14. With Buffalo down 14-12 with 4 seconds left after scoring a touchdown, they had to go for 2 points to get something out of this game. And what do you know? They actually got the 2-point conversion when Gary McDermott scored to tie the game up. He actually got an octopus there. This was the only time under Johnson all season that the Bills had gone for 2. And they got it. So I love how Johnson said, well, even if I did go for 2, who's to say that we get it? Even though the only other time they did it, they literally got it. But more importantly, that's not the point. That's not the point. If you go for 2 and you miss, you lead at 20-19. The Jets with a field goal win the game. If you go for 2 and make it, you lead at 22-19. The Jets with a field goal only tie the game. But if you go for 1, regardless of whether you make it or you miss it, the Jets only need a field goal to win the game. The best case scenario with an extra point and the worst case scenario with a 2-point conversion are identical. So whether you got the 2 or not is irrelevant to the decision-making process. It's like if you need to pass a final exam to pass the class, and you decide not to show up, with your logic being, well, even if I did take the final, who's to say that I pass it? That's not the freaking point. What's funny is that a quarter century later in 1992, the Bills would be on the other end of a situation like this, as they would be the beneficiaries of a head coach not knowing what the heck he was doing. When the Buffalo Bills played the New England Patriots, this man right here, Dick McPherson, decided to go for it on 4th and 1 in the second quarter, and said that he did it because his Patriots were trailing the game 6-0. He said that if it was a 3-0 ball game, then of course, he would have played to tie it up. But because they were trailing 6-0, he wanted to score a touchdown on the drive and play for that. Which makes sense, even if some might disagree with that notion and might say to take the points because it's early. However, the Patriots were trailing 3-0, not 6-0. In other words, McPherson completely blanked on what the score was and forgot what should be the most basic knowledge of any coach's responsibilities. If you want to learn more about that absolutely crazy display of ineptitude, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. However, it's crazy that what McPherson did in 1992 was not even close to the first time that a coach made a big decision by just outright forgetting what the score of the game was. And it cost the Bills big time on this day in 1968. Look, this man right here, Harvey Johnson, might be the worst coach in pro football history. He had no business running a team. He coached 2 seasons with Buffalo in 1968 and 1971 and went 2-23-1, winning just 8% of his games. Both seasons that he was in charge of a team, said team finished dead last in the league. If you want to say that he's the worst coach of all time, honestly, I'm not going to argue with you, because he was that bad. He was so bad that despite the fact that he coached 2 seasons in a golden era for NFL films, I could only find 2 pieces of film even documenting that he existed, which you're seeing right now. And if you want any particular moment that truly exhibited his incompetence, it was that 1968 game against the Jets, where his team lost because he decided to kick the extra point in a 1-point game not knowing what the score of the contest was. Because it's tough to truly play to win the game if you don't even know if you're winning, or how much you're winning by. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.